If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.
Okay, thank you everyone. So my name is Naveen Kumar. I've been conducting this Performance Engineers Clubhouse for the past 6 months or so. So this week we are going to talk about test data management. So last week we have seen about open source contribution. So if you missed that Clubhouse, you can listen in the app itself. And also you can visit the youtube.com/QA Insights for the previous recordings. So before we get started, I would like to give a shout out to the sponsors, Redline 13. So if you want to run a high scale load testing for your JME test scripts, please check it out, redline13.com. And also, I think in the next few months, Apache Con North America is going to happen. So if you get a chance, if you are interested to submit the proposal, please check it out, Apache Con North America. They have opened performance engineers stream dedicatedly for performance engineers, where you can showcase the tools, process, observability, monitoring. So those things you can just feature in the ApacheCon. Initially, before in ApacheCon, there was no separate domain for performance engineers. So this is the first time they have opened it. So if you're interested, please submit the abstract. Okay, so without any further ado, let us get started with test data management. So test data management is it's a big topic within the software testing lifecycle. And there are various tools available in the market, like DATPOROF or Oracle's test data management, CA. So there are a lot of tools, proprietary tools, and then open source tools also. There are some widely used solutions available just for test data management. So test data management, I have seen in my experience, if you see about it, if you take any enterprise companies, they will have a dedicated team for test data management, where they will fulfill the requests from various teams, like a QA or performance or development team, and then even for the security, right? So they will fulfill the request. Okay, how many data you need, what type of data you need for your testing purpose. So if you just raise a request, they will fulfill, and then you can use the test data for your testing purpose. But in some cases, if you take small, medium enterprises, they might not have very sophisticated process to fulfill the test data requirement. So in case, most of us will be in that boat where we need to take care of our test data for our testing purpose. So there are a couple of ways you can generate the test data. One is using the synthetic generation, meaning you can generate by yourself just by putting the data into some columns or some file manually, or writing some automation. So those things you can adopt on the strategy, and then you can create your own. And the other way is taking the production dump. So people take production dump, they will apply some algorithms like scrambling or some hashing methods just to mask all the sensitive data, and then we can use those data in our test environment. So these are the two ways you can generate. Apart from these two, if you're going with some third-party solutions, like there will be some API where you can just hit the endpoint, it will give you the test data. For example, fake test data. So if you just Google for or fake API, you will get some endpoint. So if you hit the endpoint, it will give you the test data for your purpose. It could be like a very advanced fake also you can generate. For example, say I need 10,000 first name, last name, and date of birth. Then if you just send these parameters, it will give you the data. So again, this is another way to generate the test data. But mostly what we do is we generate it by ourselves, because we might not have access to the third-party APIs, or we do not have access to the production dump. Even if you get the production dump, again, it will be under compliance. Because a lot of HIPAA compliance and then payment industry compliance will be there. So it is a very complex process. So usually we don't get the production dump. Only way is to generate it by ourselves, or you can take the help from DevOps team, where you can mimic the QA environment or mimic the dev environment. So whatever they have, you just put it in your stage environment, and then you will be using it. So these are some of the ways you can leverage the test data. But when it comes to performance, it is very tricky Because mainly we need millions of records, because we are not running one user, or we are not running unit testing like developers or automation team where they do some regression or some sort of automating the test case scenarios, right? So they don't use as we do. We need millions of rows, or at least thousands of rows of records or columns of records, because we run with multiple threads, multiple virtual users. So when we use multiple virtual users, so every user will be picking the data randomly, or the users will pick the data sequentially or based on your requirement. And then they will consume a lot of data within a short period of time. For example, if you're running for 1 hour, then based on your TPS, how many transactions per second you are going to achieve, then based on that, you need the those many rows of records. So there is a calculator I have created. So if you go to perf tractor, I can post it in my YouTube channel on the LinkedIn post. So if you go to perftractor.com perftractor.xyz slash I guess calc. So if you go to this URL, I have created a calculator for how many test data required for your test. So you have to just enter some details, and then it will tell you how many rows you need. So this will help you to plan your test execution, so that you can be ready with your test data. Because most of us, what we do, we can create scripts. If your expertise in some tool or some application, you'll be very quick to create the script. But when it comes to execution, and if it is very critical application, I have to put some millions of transactions, then you need that data. So many people will ask me, okay, can I use the same data again and again, right? So this is the one of the frequently asked question in my community, and also I get a lot of messages. So definitely you should not use the test data again and again. Okay, there are a couple of reasons why. For example, say I need to submit some e-commerce order. So what I do, I send my first name, last name, my address, and then I send my order details, payment, and everything I will send in one form, right? So now I'm hitting that first request. I'm just posting these details. So very first time, if you are testing your environment, it will take some more time. Say for example, 1 second. And if you send the same request again, it will be like a 500 milliseconds. And then if you send the same request again, it will be like 200 milliseconds. And then it will be very consistent, right? So why this is happening is mainly because of the caching. So whatever you send the details, it would be cached in either in web server, or it could be cached in the database. So instead of reading from the actual disk, it will read it from the cache. And if you're retrieving the resources, so instead of retrieving the resources from the actual edge location, it will retrieve the resources from your browser, or whichever the closest cache is available. So you will miss a lot of components to test if you are using the same data again and again. So that is why you should not use your test data repeatedly in your environment. Otherwise, you will be missing a lot of defects, and then in production you will see the behavior erratically. Okay. So first of all, do not use your test data, even if it is very small test data. Try to put some logic in your request. This will help you to validate your application. So if you're using commercial tool, you will get some bells and whistles on the test data management. For example, Loadrunner. So Loadrunner, if you take, they have different types of data you can create. For example, you can have some file. You could have some date manipulations, time manipulations, missing IP, virtual thread names. So you will get some additional features where you don't need to write some program to achieve that. And also Loadrunner supports data split for each virtual user, like a blocks, right? So one virtual user can access only one set of record again and again, or set of users can access the set of records. So you can create some blocks in Loadrunner that is very kind of a very useful feature if you are using some advanced testing strategy, right? But if you take JMeter out of the box, you cannot allocate some data. You cannot tell the the threads to go to fetch only particular row for your testing purpose. So it cannot be done. So you have to write some logic, or you have to depend on some third-party plugin. So like this, based on the tool, you will have some advanced features, or you might not have that features. So based on your business test strategy, you have to adopt these features from the test data perspective. Otherwise, again, you will miss the real world situations, because we are performance engineers, right? So our job is to mimic the real world situations. So it is not like I'm just following a very simple workload model. Usually we follow, right? We just inject the steady state. But in production, it not be steady state. In production, it will be open workload model, but we will test in closed workload model. So again, we have covered this open versus closed in previous sessions. So please check it out, the audio, or you can visit the YouTube channel to understand more about open versus closed. So first we have to decide what kind of strategy you are going to bring it to the table when it comes to test data management. So any questions, guys? I see some comments here. Yes, I will post it here. Probably before end of the session, I will post it. Okay, Verma is asking, test data will be limited. Example, 4,000 URL, you want to generate 1 million transactions. That will be repeating data. Yes. So here you have, you cannot test as per your requirement, because you need lots of data to achieve the transactions. So if you have only limited, then you may not be testing it properly. Hi, Seth. Thank you for joining.
Hey Naveen, thanks for accepting me as a speaker. Yeah, it's a really good topic and key important topic you're covering today. So I got a little bit late. So I thought of having 2 cents here. Uh,
Yes.
uh, yeah. The first one is like the real scenario. I will tell what I faced currently. So there is a scenario where we were testing with the five records that five cards, five credit card or debit card scenario in one request. Okay, so that will be pulling all the five records of information as a single request as data. But in the prod, this is I'm giving the example of a real world scenario. We should be real using real world test data. That is I'm giving the example right here. So what happened, like there is a situation, one of the request, it was requesting 9,000 cards in a single request. Okay, that triggered in a full disease and lot of you know um, production issues happen. So it's always like Naveen suggested, better go real world test data scenario. Your test data should be as accurate as real world, not like happy path scenario test data. That is one thing. And Naveen, would you also cover the like limitation in the JMeter test data management? I'm interested in that part.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes. Yes, Sid. So yeah, that's a good point you brought. So actually, yeah, actually, whenever you begin a project, right, always think about how to mimic the real world. That's my first question will come to my mind. So I'll always ask for the analytics, the production analytics, or any data, which will help me to understand the pattern, right? So right, that's what we cannot mimic as in real world, because we are engineers and we have the closed environment. We are trying to lab, but try to match the pattern. Okay, I say you used to match it, it's possible. Please try to reach that how production behaves in your stage environment. Okay, so any questions, guys? So Varma is asking, is random versus sequence test data is going to make any difference? See, random, basically all the tools supports this random picking, random rows. Sequentially means it will go one by one, unless you have any business case, whether you need to go sequentially just to preserve some order, or otherwise you can just pick the random. So it really doesn't matter which order you are going to read the data from the data source. So you mentioned this one, right, Sid, about the 9,000 something, right? So is it a post call? I mean, get call,
Yeah,
or
it's a
is it
no, it's a post only with that get information. It's a get request in the post.
get request? Okay. So you're posting, you need this many data, and then it will
Yeah,
give back
yeah,
the
yeah.
details. Okay.
Yeah, but the production team came us because of lot of foolishness happening. How come you sign off with how this build? Then we had really dig into the production logs and we fetched out that request. Actually, why I'm telling because so the real world scenarios sometimes we may not mimic as real as in the real world, so
Correct,
we couldn't
correct.
able to reproduce that issue in our performance environment. There were a single full gc for the period of 4 hours, but in the production, because of that 9000 requests in 9000 records in a single request, it's making a 3 to 4 full gcc in a span of 4 minutes. So
Okay,
that
I
is
understand.
where some we need to be very cautious about test data. We have to test, we have to ask when you are taking the requirements from the test data perspective, you should ask what is the limitation of test data in terms of data size records. This question will solve the solution in the initial stage.
That, yes, that's correct. So which tool you are using for this reading this particular request?
Splunk
Okay,
Splunk,
okay.
we have
And the
Splunk.
performance testing tool,
Yeah, Larry, Loadrunner.
Loadrunner. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Because
and
JMeter again, you cannot display. You cannot. You have to change some settings to see all the response. If it is very huge, right, it will truncate.
no, the problem here was is we were testing with low records. In a single
Okay,
request, we are sending a 5 cards request information, and in the production, in the single request, 9000 cards information they are requesting in a single post call.
single
So
post. Okay,
yeah,
so that's
that
what
was
you
the
failed to
problem.
test that maximum record or kind of a pattern, right?
Yeah,
You tested
full
with
GC we
100, you
couldn't
tested
able
with
to.
500.
Yeah, full GC we couldn't able to replicate in our performance environment.
Correct, correct.
So
Yes,
I personally digged in and a lot of appreciation for me because these microservices, right? So in the microservice world, it is tough to get as accurate as NFRs operationals.
yes,
So they are
that's
not.
correct.
So it's a chaos microservices interacting with each. Today you may request this microservice, tomorrow some other else may be requesting. It's keep on getting I know the end users will getting added to the microservice, like information is open end, you cannot
Correct, correct.
restrict affairs. So
Yes, yes.
why I am correlating here, because it is better when you are getting the test data requirement, always take type of test data you are testing with, what type of
Right.
test data, what is the limitation, and also the size of data getting download also matter sometimes. Sometimes a single request may download 1 MB data, sometimes same single request may download 5 to 10 MB data. That time response time varies, so you always need to be little extra cautious on your test data when you are getting the test data.
Yes. So in your case, you have to distribute the load based on the number. Say 10% of the people are asking for 9,000.
True, true.
20,
I
20%
did
of
the
the
same.
people 500. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Finally, we added that scenario. One extra scenario we added, like max use case, exceptional use case. 1% of test data will be 9000 records.
9,000. Yes. Then you will get, but your response time will be 95% will be very high.
Yes, yes,
Response time. Yes.
and
Because
they
it will
limited. But final
influence your
solution was Navin, like they restricted not to use more than 5 records.
that's what we have to put some limit, right? Otherwise, people ask for 1 million or so. It will
Yeah, it
hang.
will entirely, stop world scenario. It will create a stop world scenario for entire all the microservices.
Yes. Because
And
JSON objects is very expensive.
yeah, yeah. And would you also elaborate more upon this test data management? Because sequential random, unique and once is not possible in JMeter, right, Naveen? So would you explain that would be helpful? Because in the load runner we can go for a lot of permutation and combination, lot of scenarios we can design in this data management. But JMeter, would
Yes.
you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I will. I recently wrote a post. Yeah, I will explain that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Verma. Thank you for joining. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah. Hi, Navin. This is Rakesh here. How are you? Long
I'm good.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Naveen, what I was referring, like in my comments, hopefully you understood. So 90% of the time, it's very hard to replicate exactly the same level of test data what you want, like the exact amount of the production data in the test environment. So there is always a repetition or a limitation that's going to happen in the performance test environment, right?
That's
So the
correct. Yes.
example where the example where what I've quoted is like let's say if there is a 4,000. Let's say you are publishing a website and there are 4,000 links in the website in the product in the performance environment, and in the production that may go up to more high number of more than 4,000, like make it like 40,000 or something like that. So when you test it, it's going to be repetition. But the only thing what I noticed was the CPU usage graph were like a sinusoidal wave. It goes like goes to the high and then again goes to the down, and then again starts again and goes to the high and goes to the down. So what's happening is it's a cache whenever it get clears, right? The response time whenever in the next cache till the time it fills it up, the response times are coming high,
Okay.
and then the response times are going down. But that pattern is going to continue. So, and the conclusion what I coming up with is the CPU usage was less than 15%, like less than 14 of 10 to 15% for the entire test duration, 3 hours test duration. So, which means the cache is working as per the expectations, and the test data repetition is going to happen. So,
Okay.
is that a fair assumption to think the system is behaving as expected?
Okay. Is it Java application, Java ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a Java based application.
Okay. Did you try to correlate why the CPU is throttling high by comparing with the GC time?
It's a cache is filling up.
No, GC
So
time.
the cache,
Whenever the
yeah.
CPU
So
goes up, what is the behavior at GC?
the garbage collection, I didn't remember exactly. I haven't checked the garbage collection portion, but what I did check was the cache, the time limit for the cache clearance.
Okay, that
So
yeah, that usually people, yeah, they depends on the business. They just configure some value.
yeah,
So what I say is when the CPU goes up, you have to take some dump and see why CPU is throttling at the max.
CPU is not throttling. Like 15% of the CPU usage is fair enough, isn't it? That's
It's
nothing,
across
right?
15% is consistent throughout
The
your
entire
test.
test duration is 15%. But the argument here is because the test data is very limited, right?
Hmm.
And the cache allocated time is like let's say 15 minutes, right?
Hmm.
So we are not doing a proper test to confirm that like the cache is uh, we are not doing a proper test like what happens if the new request comes up out of this cache,
Correct.
uh,
So
because the
probably
test
what
data
you
is
can
so
do is
small.
you can which
Yeah.
tool you're using?
This one JMeter.
JMeter. Okay, try to clear
Yeah.
the cache for each iteration and see what's the behavior.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we are doing now. But it's the same behavior. The only thing is what we are happy with is the response times are not that high.
Hmm.
So 99.9, 99.23, I think. So the response times are as per the SLAs. The only counter
Okay.
argument what we are having is because the run data that we are using is a sequential
Hmm.
in a sequential order. So that's the reason why the same CPU pattern is repeating.
Rakesh, Naveen, I have mine's 2 cents here. Shall I?
Yes, sure, sure. You go ahead,
So
please.
please go ahead.
Hey, Rakesh. Actually, in geometry world, the test data means the main purpose of using test data to avoid the caching problem. Okay, that is the first point. And yes, it's not sequential or anything. So you can be the sequential or random unique ones. It's a depending on your requirement. But if it's even though if it's sequential, as long as it's not getting repeated, the like you said, there is a cache every 15 minutes the cache is getting clear, right?
Hmm.
So it's not impact on your response time if it's cached, the response time should not be impacted actually. If it's cache, the response time just come like as quick as like that. So what is your problem here? Like
Let's
the
say
pattern.
instead of 4,000 URLs, if I have a 40,000 URLs,
Okay.
right? And the time limit is like, the cache clearance is 10 minutes or something like that. So for every 10th minute, like, if every time a new request come in, what happens is the CPU usage as well as the response times are going to increase if it is a new request. If it's because my worry is here, because the requests are coming in because the test data is so small, and every time request is coming within the cache is filling up and reusing it every time.
Then it should impact very
Correct.
Yeah.
quick. It's
So
actually better, that will give better performance. It will not lead higher CPUs or higher response if the cache is not implemented. That is the case, but looks like the problem is like for you, if it's getting a high response and high CPUs, definitely like Naveen suggested, definitely you need to look into the GC, how frequently GC is coming into the picture, irrespective of test data. Test data, it never limits, because today they can use 4,000 URLs, tomorrow 5,000 URLs also, doesn't matter. It should be, the application should be in the form of auto scale. Okay, so they should implement
you
that.
won't be able to test the auto scaling at all, because your cache is filled so quickly. Let's say this 4,000 request finishes in 2 minutes,
Okay.
and the next 13 minutes is the same request it's going to answer. You know what I mean? So here the problem, what I'm trying to highlight is, I'm trying to give an example for the issue where whenever you have a low volume test data. So technically we are not in a position to uh, confirm, like, we have done adequate testing. And yeah, did you get my point, Naveen? Or
No, I
Two,
mean,
yeah, too many factors you are talking here. So see, additional test data, even though it's a limited test data, enough test data, the application should behave as same expected. That's what your point is, right?
and what I'm saying is, a large amount of test data, having a large amount of test data will give us more freedom to test replicate the scenario more close to the production system.
production. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to
Correct.
say.
That is always.
And
That is correct. Yeah,
yeah,
that is correct. Yes.
that's right. So most of the organizations, what they do, in the especially the area that I'm working on, so they limit the performance test data due to x number of factors. Like, we don't have this, we don't have that. So with that, whatever that the results we are going to give is like, a fully the production behavior. Yeah. So that's what I've written in my report anyway. Yeah. Just
And
limitation of the test data.
that
Yeah.
sequential and the pattern how you select, it's not a matter,
It doesn't
as
matter.
long as the
Yes. Yeah.
cache. Yeah, the
See, the
matter
reading
is.
data, it is up to
Yeah,
the tool, right? It's a tool feature. It's
yeah.
not you're doing something on your application. No.
Um,
It,
yeah, you see, because when I started investigating, I thought, like, that does a random or sequence is going to give any different pattern. Like, if they appear in the request, like, 1 to 4,000 appear in sequence, the next 4,000 ones is going to be the first one, right?
Mhm.
So those all cached. But let's say if you randomize the data, then in the first 2 minutes, let's say only 1 to 2,000 were used randomly, and then in the third minute onwards, if you get, like, 2 to 4,000, then I thought, like, it might have a slight variation in the
No, no.
response
It's
times.
No,
But
the
I
duplication
suggest, see,
yeah,
I suggest to run a clean run.
yeah.
Clear everything, clean the cache, everything, restart servers, do a
yeah, yeah.
fresh run. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
then you can baseline the behavior.
Yeah, agree.
And you cannot say the duplicates can happen in the sequential. Duplication cannot may not accept in a random. A random may pick three users randomly, can pick the same user. The test data in the same scenario can happen if a limited test data is there. Sequential they are using, three other user may use same data. So there's possibility of duplication is always possible in either random or sequential. So that's only the option it will give you to enable it from tools perspective, but it is you have to decide whether the duplicate should be happen or not. That is your requirement, Rakesh.
Yeah. So the other point is with the randomizing the test data, like let's say the response times are there, right? The interval of the response time pattern was exactly same when you use a sequential. When you use the randomize, because the URL what it's going to hit at the 3 minute 1 second for this interval is different in the next interval. When I'm saying next interval, in the next cache interval. So the response, even though the overall response time is not affected, but
But
the
how is the
sequence
real
of the
time?
response.
How is the real time? That is you have to keep always in mind.
Yeah, yeah,
How the
that's
real
true.
time is happening? Is it happening
Yeah,
sequential or random or unique? Likewise, you have to mimic in the tool.
Yeah,
That is
it
only
will
the
be
function.
random
it's a random.
mostly.
It will be
So
random, definitely.
what I say is, Verma, so what is the duration of the cache? 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, I think so.
15 minutes. See, 15 minutes have a ramp up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Load everything within 15 minutes so that all the URLs will reach that cache interval threshold. Then remove the ramp up from your analysis. Okay. Don't consider
Mm-hmm.
the response time for the ramp up
Yeah,
or ramp
obviously.
down. Keep
Yeah,
only the steady state and see what is the response time and run some tests again and again to see whether you are
yeah,
getting the same result or not.
yeah, yeah.
And how many users you are testing, Verma? Like
It's a 4,400 users. Yeah, and
threads in
yeah,
terms of threads are users 4,000 threads.
4,400 threads. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a
How
big
much
test.
test
Yeah.
data you have?
There are a lot of scenarios, and this one only I'm talking about one particular scenario where I thought the issue might be related to the test data. Yeah.
Because if you kind of getting that as that kind of thing calculation, Naveen's blog is the best blog. He has given so calculating the test data, how much threads, how much test data, and everything. You can use that one, and you will get that requirement accurately.
Yeah,
Sure.
and also
Thank you.
you're distributing the load, right,
Yeah,
Rakesh,
yeah. We are distributing the load.
for multiple machines, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So
not from one machine.
it's a cloud based load generator. So
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Verma, for sharing the insights. Okay, let us continue.
Let's
Okay,
continue. Yeah.
so yes, thank you. So Sid was asking how to block use the block usage like in Loadrunner in JMeter, right? Sid, that's the question, correct?
Not only that size now, that is Naveen. So most of them they use. See, I'm talking about me using JMeter freshly. They know only use CSV data config. They sequentially unique and end of the file. That option is there, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't see, like you already mentioned, as much as flexibility in type of test data management. Sticking to the topic today, so we don't have that much options into the JMeter. That's what I would like to.
Yes. Yeah. First of all, before we start anything, right? First, you have to decide whether you need to parameterize the data or not. Okay. So that's the first thing I do. Example could be like say first name, last name. You are passing some first name, last name. So think of you have millions of records. So instead of storing the first name, last name in a CSV file, so what you can do is you can generate it using the random function. Okay, so random function, if you use carefully, you have to use the random function because random function also might be causing some trouble for very high volume test. But what I trying to say is do not put everything in the parameter file. Where if it is possible to generate on the fly, then use the functions, built-in functions, or some regular expression feature pattern, then fill it on the fly. Okay, for example, zip code or date of birth, first name, last name, some random address, or telephone number, or Aadhaar card, SSN. Right? So these are the patterns. Usually we store it in a parameter file. So instead of storing it some parameter, of course, business will take whatever the series of string you are sending. At least they will expect some 10 characters. So you have to match the business requirements. So instead of storing it everything in your data file, put it in a script itself. Okay, and do a one run and see you are using the response time and other parameters are within the limits. Then you can, if you have a test data file, then run with that and compare you don't see much difference. Because I have done this, again, depends on the technology and the application. But what I am trying to say is try to optimize your test data file itself. So do not put everything in your test data file. Do not put more than 25 columns in your test data file, and do not put millions of records in one single file. So these are the pain points of a performance engineer, because you will spend more time on debugging the test data, and it is very tough to debug if you have millions of records. So I'm not talking about thousands or hundreds. You can simply open it in your Notepad++ or Notepad and fix it. I'm talking about millions where you cannot even open the file. Okay, because I have come across this situation multiple times. So you really don't want to end up in such situation. So if you are using millions of records, do not try to put it in some data file. That try to generate it from the business logic in the script itself. So with a lot of Loadrunner or JMeter, you can use the functions, built-in functions for these purposes. Okay, so any comments on this input?
Yeah, that's really sounds good. That in fact I did the same implication, but there was a 50 test data. I know all are working, but I have to use randomly instead of sequential. What I did, like I made in single CSV multiple columns by shuffling in Excel, randomly shuffling those values, and I utilized. I implemented the random function in the test data itself, so it will pick
Correct.
randomly.
Yeah, always use random with caution, and make sure it is not causing any problems, because random also has some what I say, some cons. Okay, for
Yeah.
example, UID, right? UID we usually use in JSON or some random file name, etc. But UID, the implementation, you can fine tune by changing some of the parameters at the OS level. So I can, again, I will share that blog article, which is written by Ram, CEO of Ycrash. So they have fine tuned the UID generation, and then they have fixed some Java performance issues. So you have to be very careful when you use random function, but most of the time it will not cause any issues. But if you are seeing any issues, again, you have to debug the random function irrespective of any tool. Okay, even if you are using built-in random function, that also might cause problem for very high volume test. I'm not talking about some thousands of transactions per second, like millions I'm talking. Okay, so you have to be very, very caution, but always try to utilize the random function in any tool, whatever the tool you are using, implement that. So I'm trying to reduce the test data file management itself, so that no need to spend time on your test data file. I have actually, we have bought a new software where we couldn't even open the production dump, or whatever the production team, DevOps team sent me. I couldn't even open because it's very huge, a couple of GBs, where you cannot open using Notepad or Notepad++. So you have to use some other proprietary tool just to open. And again, you can just open. Okay, if you want to find and replace, or if you want to remove something, again, it will take a lot of time to process, because we have millions of records in one single file. So always try to optimize the test data file, and try not to put everything in your test data file. You will save a lot of time. So
True.
this is one thing I would like to share. And another thing is, yeah,
Yeah, sorry, go on. I'll ask you
yeah, sure.
after you complete.
Yeah, this is one thing. Okay, so this is one thing. So try to optimize. And second thing is, do not put some random lines in between your rows of data. Say you have thousands of records, and sometimes, accidentally people will append the data. So at the time of appending, what they do, they will accidentally will add a new line somewhere else, and then that will cause a failure in your test run, because the new line, right, whenever there is a new line, blank new line, the tool will try to read that line, and nothing will be there, then it will send some blank data to your request. So whenever you're seeing that blank data, again, the black end also will fail, and then this will cause some percentage in your execution. So you have to, again, deep dive to go each step by step to understand why it is failing. Unless you have something like a New Relic or Dynatrace, where you can see what's going on for the particular request, then it is very tough to identify the issue. So you have to spend a lot of time on debugging. So try not to put some special characters uh, or new line or just a blank row or blank column or a column with no name. So these are small mistakes people do, honest mistakes people do, but it will the cost of fixing is will be your time, because I have done this and then I have troubleshooted this. So
Yeah.
that's why I try to optimize always this test data file. Okay.
Two inputs here, see, Naveen. So to avoid this, like I think you have revealed a key important real time question. It's been asked in the interview, saying that there is 100 test data and only 90 test data is getting read, and last one is not getting read. What is the reason? So there is a empty space line. That is a key important question being asked in the interview panels. That thanks for that, bringing that question here. And
Yes.
to avoid this, whenever you are utilizing the test data, better always copy paste it into the notepad if it's a limited, like if it's not unlimited, like you said, we may need to another third party tools, and you use notepad plus plus control h by the empty space. There is a slash or slash n is there. There are free utility tools to remove the end of the line and remove it and paste it into the your notepad, where your notepad
Yes.
has csv, to remove the empty space lines.
That's
There
correct.
are
Yes.
some free utility tools in the notepad plus plus, even in the excel you can do that, and notepad plus plus. These are the key inputs before you are feeding your test data. Always check it and remove the and put your cursor at the end of your last test data, put enter and save it. These are three
That's
inputs.
correct. Yes. Yeah. Loadrunner expects the new line at the last row, but a JMeter you don't need to put a last row. Again, depends on the tool you're using. Again, it's a good point. Always make sure you are following the format or what is expected out of the tool. Okay,
Yeah.
so that is one thing. And then I always use regular expressions. So in these situations, I always have some kind of a notes where I put all the regex I use. So this regex will find the some pattern, for example, zip code pattern, or it will find the new line or carriage return, right? So both are different based on the operating system. So it will always look for the blank row or some extra characters. So I have always keep a track of my regular expression, and then I usually use a Notepad++ where you can easily see there are a lot of identification mark you can put it for each character. And VS Code also is a great tool to write regular expression to manipulate the test data file. But never don't use any proprietary file extensions. So what I mean is, do not save your test data as .xls or .xlx or pages or Google Sheets. So do not go with any proprietary file extensions. Always use CSV or DAT or TXT. Okay. If you're going with CSV, always use comma separated value. Do not use /t or space or double quotes or single quotes. Do not use any special character. Always use one comma. Okay. That is one thing I always see people. They will just try to be very showcasing their skill. They'll just put /t or space. Then it will even small mistake will cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. Naveen, have you ever worked with any test data management tool? Like, have you ever connected the performance center directly pulling out the data from a database system or a test data management system? Like,
Yeah, when
pulling it
I
from
was
a
an
DB.
automation engineer, I used to do that. But
Yeah,
after moved to performance, see,
yeah,
frankly, it's been many years since I worked in Loadrunner.
yeah.
From past
Uh,
5 years, I am working in JMeter. So really,
uh,
I'm not fond of the proprietary tools. See, I work for a
okay.
very enterprise company. We don't use proprietary tools.
Uh. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, but that is something like, many of the enterprises system, they want their test data to be protected. And instead of, going through the sheets or, Excel and putting
That's correct.
into
Yes.
sharing.
Yeah,
So what they
it
would like to
depends on
do is,
the
yeah.
compliance, right? For example, they have to follow HIPAA compliance or PCI, Payment Industry
Mm,
Gateway compliance. So if
yeah,
in case the compliance says, okay, you need to be in this AWS region, you have to use
mm,
these tools. Otherwise, the
mm,
people, it's not really required, right? Why you invest money on the proprietary tools unless you
No,
have a
actually,
regulation to follow it.
Micro Focus has. I am not getting it name. Micro Focus has a test data management tool, which is
Yes.
It's a VSTS virtual,
VSTS. Yeah, yeah.
and to be frank, like Verma, like Naveen said, let me explain the scenario in microservice world automation test. So we are avoiding this test data layer. What I mean is, like, we are virtualizing the request response in the virtualization steps. So we are using a dev test, like you might have heard Broadcom dev test. Earlier it used to call Lisa dev test tool.
CA Lisa, the
Yeah.
earlier name. CA Lisa.
So
Mhm.
now it's Broadcom has taken over, and same we have several like RFT rational. IBM has a RFT rational functional testing tool, which is also provide that functionality, and there are some other tools where we are not even using the test data. So what we are doing is like we are mimicking the request response in the stubs. Yeah, of course we have the test data parameters. It doesn't mean that we are not using test data parameters. So we are mimicking the response from the stubs. That means you are the owner of your test data. You can create the response for your test data however you want, whatever the data you want, whatever the response times delay you want.
Mm.
You can mention all these things into the stubs. So in this advanced stage, using a separate test data like tool, I think yeah, earlier it was like Naveen said, we used to use VSTS long back, but nowadays it's too advanced, right? Everything is automation, shifting left. So they want to go on the fly. So that is another
I
point I
think
would
I
like to
think it's
clear.
still a good efficient way of using the or managing the test data, but again it varies from case by case. Like if there is
Yeah,
a
yeah, true.
controlled environment, then they don't want to give hands out to the test data. Like they want to give only read option to the test data.
So
So yeah,
Naveen and anyone, you people using this test data virtualization?
No, we try to avoid virtualization.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we always test
yeah.
end to
I
end
thought I'll just
with
give some.
real data.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is another topic we can bring up probably in future, virtualization.
Yeah, true, true. I thought I'd just add, the different element to what we are discussing. Like, even that comes under test data management. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Virtualization is different. I mean, it's been many years since I virtualized my test data.
Yeah.
So before we almost time, Arun, I sent you the invite link. Please accept if you have any questions. Okay, so yeah, these are things I would like to share. I already shared most of the points. So before we wind off, I would like to share one use case. Okay, why I brought this topic. Arun, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, please let me know. We can talk.
Hi, Naveen. Hope you're doing good. Naveen, just a quick one. So you mentioned in JMeter where you told us to avoid the situations where if we can write it through the code, for example, generating a UUID and instead of adding so many
Yes,
data in the CSV, right?
correct.
So wouldn't be the case where we had a kind of adding overhead to the script by adding the logic. So can you just give me an example of where we can go with adding a logic and where we can, use the
Yes.
CSV file concept?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, right? You have to take a baseline. You should not put everything random. Not
Hmm.
everything on the fly you should generate because it will cost some CPU cycles to produce the data, whatever you need. And again, if you are running with 10,000 threads or 1,000 threads, again, each thread will also consume its own time to process the function. So you have to be very careful in case if you're going with random anything. If you're using random function, you have to always be very caution, irrespective of the
Yeah.
tool or language. Okay, so that's why I always run a baseline test with random function, and then I will use the real data, which is some say thousands of rows of records of data. Then I will run the test and see is there any significant jump in the response time, CPU, memory, GC, everything. Okay, so
Hmm.
if I'm
Okay.
seeing very negligible difference, then I will go with the random, and then I will just discard my test data file. I don't need it. right? So this is the exercise
Yeah.
you have to do
Yeah.
to figure it out whether the random is causing any function, any issues or not,
All right. Yeah.
right? Because that's why I want to present one use case where recently I came across, I saved around 750K records of test data. So if I would have followed a business use case, I should have at least 750K records in my test data file. But instead of putting everything in my test data, I implemented a logic using Groovy where I was able to generate the payload, the JSON payload by Groovy scripting, and then I executed around 5,000 TPS without any issues.
Okay.
So the core, the Groovy script will generate very big, some thousands of lines of JSON payload, and then it will send it as a post request. Then I baselined, okay, I'm doing a lot of stuff here. The Groovy script is a lot of manipulation it is doing. It is calling the random. It is generating some JSON payload, array, object. So everything it is generating. So I thought, okay, why, suppose in case my JSR is bottleneck, how do I know? So unless I run the test, I will not know, right? So I executed the test with my Groovy and I executed the test with raw test data. Then I saw the difference. Okay, I find nothing. Of course, I used multiple machines, very powerful instances, but yeah, you have some freedom, right? Cloud is given a lot of opportunities to explore.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you have to baseline your test, then see the difference. If it's the negligible difference, like 1-2 milliseconds is fine. But if you're seeing like 20-30 milliseconds difference, then of course, there is some impact by using these functions. See, 1 or 2 functions will be fine. Okay, I'm not saying one function will you can clearly see it with your eyes. What I'm saying is, say you have 10 columns. So instead of putting 10 columns in a file and you are using random function in 10 different places, then that might cause some trouble. Okay, with respect to CPU cycle and processing time, everything. But if you try to baseline that and run it with your test data, you might not see big difference. Then you will be good with your random function.
Yeah. Naveen, two questions, Naveen.
Yes,
I assume you use JMeter for this. Number one.
yes, yes.
Number two, where is your load generators were hosted? Is that through a Storm Runner or something like that, or
No, yeah, no,
what
we
is the
don't
tool that
use
you use?
proprietary. We use
Oh,
our,
okay,
we have
okay.
our own framework. Yeah.
All right. So, does there any limitation of number of threads that you can trigger on a machine? Like, there is a certain limitations, right? Either you can
Yes,
go up
correct.
to, yeah.
Again,
So,
it
how
depends
does it
on the
going to
instance
distribute the
family, right?
tester? Yeah.
See, I always go with the M5.
Uh-huh.
M5 large. That is my favorite instance because
Okay, okay.
it balances both CPU and memory. But of
Uh-huh.
course, if you have budget, you can go with C or what X also. So it depends
Yeah, yeah.
on budget. And
Yeah.
then I usually
So,
go with
M5 large,
16
like
GB
you.
RAM.
Okay, okay. How many you triggered? Like, how many threads you used? When you say 5,000 TPS per second,
I don't
that's a
usually go
huge.
by threads. I usually go by TPS. How many TPS I can throttle that machine. So maximum from that
Okay,
experiment,
got
I
it.
reached 2000 plus something.
2,000 plus. Okay,
Yeah,
makes sense.
2000
Yeah.
plus TPS. TPS.
TPS. Okay, okay.
Yeah, TPS.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the application you are testing, right? If it is a very heavy application, then you cannot
See,
produce that TPS.
see, TPS shouldn't be a problem. Like, you can use one user and hit the TPS. But if you have something like, you need to maintain
Mhm.
the concurrency as well, like, the number of users as well, number of threads as well. That's when the challenge comes up. Yeah.
Correct, correct, correct. See, I always
Yeah.
give some room. I don't use 80% CPU of each load generator. I always keep it 60.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I don't I don't go more than 60 percentage. So if it
Yeah.
is going more than 60 percentage, I will pull up another LG.
Mm-hmm. You define your rule like that. Okay.
Yeah, I pull another LG so that the load will be distributed in that.
6 seconds. Okay.
That's what you have to spend a couple of hours. If you spend, you will have the baseline in with you.
Mm-hmm.
Then you
Naveen,
can
your
spin up
use
all
case, Naveen.
whatever you have. Yeah.
Hey Navin, in your use case, when you say random, two things: a random function for generating the test data is one, and randomly picking the test data you're one. So which one you are relating to?
No, random function I'm talking.
Okay. Okay.
A random function in any tool, whatever the tool you're
So
using,
instead of
random
test
functions,
data, you
built-in
are
functions.
imposing random function. You mean?
Actually, in my script, I don't have test data concept at all.
Okay.
Everything will
For
be
the payload.
generated. Yeah, within the payload also I'm generating by Groovy,
Okay.
because I have written some Groovy where it will automatically generate the JSON. It will automatically fill with the respective data. In my test data, I have only 2 columns. That's it. So actually, I should have 8 columns. Okay,
Okay.
so the business told, okay, it could be random. We are not actually doing some check. Only 2 columns we do manually validate. Rest everything you can manipulate by your own. So I have done that in Groovy, and then JSON payload also I'm generating on the fly. So there is no static payload.
So still I didn't get the point. So do you suggesting to use a random or a
No,
random
no,
function
that's what you
or?
have to do a baseline before you use the
Oh,
random function. That's what I'm
oh,
saying. Say,
okay.
for
Got
example,
now got.
say I am adding 5 items to the cart. Okay,
Okay.
then you will have 5 items in your payload, right? Think about JSON array. For each
Okay.
item, I have one array. So 5 items means again 5 arrays, index starting with 0 to 4.
4.
And tomorrow they are telling, okay, every customer is placing 10. So in that case, you have to generate the payload 10, and then you have to keep it as another request. And tomorrow they say 1,000. So every time you need to make some changes to your script. You don't need really that. So what you can do, you can generate on the fly. Okay, just configure the number. Okay, 10 means generate 10 JSON array. 50 means 50 array. Just generate it on the fly, so that tomorrow if they come up with 1 million also, you have to just feed that number, and then the Groovy script will generate the payload.
True, true. This logic is, yeah, you are implementing the script itself. This logic, based on your request, you can increase on your pattern the number
Correct.
of days and like, true. But
Correct.
what if the case, if it's the real time test data,
Mhm.
randomly you have to pick? That is my question.
That's what the real, whatever the data I supposed to use, that is there in the test data file.
Oh, okay, okay.
So only whatever the business doesn't care, I'm just trying
Got
to
it.
put in my random function.
Now everything makes sense, right? Yeah, thanks for explaining, Navin. No,
Yeah,
that
if I have to follow this everything, right, I need to have 750K rows in
true,
my test data file. I don't want that. I don't want that overhead.
true,
Because
true.
tomorrow they change, right? Okay, use this pattern. Then I have to refine and replace everything. I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for explaining, Navin. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Rakesh, for joining today's session. Yeah, this session
Thanks,
is
Naveen.
recorded. You can watch it anywhere, YouTube or in the app. Yeah, happy weekend, guys. Thank you, Jacob, for joining. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Rajesh. Happy weekend. Yeah, next week we'll come up with some other topic. Have a
Thanks,
good
Naveen.
weekend,
Cheers. Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, Naveen. Have a good weekend. Yeah, bye.
If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.